one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Hey, Cleveland. Welcome to another edition of Backfire with John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey, or Franklin Chansey and John Stanberry, either way you want to look at it. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Hey, Steve.
We do talk about important facts that matter. That's what our little slogan says. So let's start talking about the school board vote this morning. 4-3 for the buyout. What's your opinions? What's going to happen next? Well, I hear some of the county commissions now no longer going to look for money for funding these schools. They've got all this money to waste buying out. There
are lots of rumors swirling around, and that's all they are at this point. But rumors that there's already an individual who's already been determined who's going to be the next director.
I can tell you, I've asked people directly about that, and I've had school board members, some of the ones that are being accused of all these nefarious plans, and they say not only have they never talked to that individual about it, that individual has never brought it up.
Well, let's go ahead and share who's the individual.
No, I'm not going to do that. No.
I love these things.
I'm not.
If you want to,
because as I started off by saying, it's rumors swirling around, and that's not the same thing. Obviously that meeting was a very contentious meeting last night. A lot of teachers and parents there. A lot of accusations hurled around.
What kind of accusations were being swirled around?
Well, I thought the biggest one, board member Critchfield, who resigned after the meeting, made a definite allegation that there had been significant violations of the Sunshine Law.
As I understand it, that originally came from Mr. Dillard, and he's talking about Mr. Lilios's discussions apparently with Johnny about the buyout. And
that's not a Sunshine Law violation.
I agree, but my point is, whether it is or isn't, apparently doesn't matter to these people as long as you can throw an accusation out.
That's not the way I understood it. What I understood was the suggestion that more than two board members had jointly discussed the issue amongst themselves in private. As I understand the rule, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you have some experience with family members with this, two members of an elected body can have all the conversations they want with each other about issues, but more than two cannot.
No, I think it's
that becomes a deliberation.
No, and that's always been one of the problems with the Sunshine Law. Apparently, if two members go out to lunch and they talk about any kind of vote that might come up, that's a violation of the Sunshine Law.
I don't think it is. I think it requires more than two.
Well, the problem is nobody really knows. There's no definitive nature to this. I know that, for example, there was one ruling where two members of two different bodies got together and discussed an issue, and that was not a violation of the Sunshine Law because they didn't vote on the same body. One was from one body, one was from another. The real problem with the Sunshine Law is that it came out of the Tennessee Waltz scandal, and what did the legislature do? They passed rules and regulations for the county commissioners that don't apply to the legislature, and the commissioners weren't the ones that caused the problem in the first place.
Well, anyway, there's a lot going on with this that we don't know about, I'm sure. Now, I thought we were supposed to deliver the news first here. Now, y'all got some good stuff here you're not sharing with me, I can tell.
Well, I can tell you that I don't see why we would want to honor the opinion for a replacement to someone who didn't take their commitment to the voters that elected them seriously enough to stay in office. Because Ms. Critchfield, over the years, has had absolutely no problem whatsoever being in a 4-3 vote when she was on the winning side of the 4-3 vote. So for her to resign because she was now on the losing side of a vote, I think is a dereliction of her duty to the people that elected her. I think that it lets them down because they elected her to be their voice, and I don't understand why we would then turn around and let her choose her replacement.
It's us against them scenario. Is that
Well,
what you're
look,
saying?
read her quote. Read her quote in the Free Press. "Vengeance is mine." Now, what kind of reasonable person invokes biblical proportion vengeance over a vote? This is what bodies are elected to do. They're elected to make decisions. You have a vote. It's a democracy, and the majority wins. And as I've said, she had no problem winning by 4-3. She just doesn't like losing by 4-3. And to that matter, I will also tell you that a former school board member, I was told, was basically skulking in the back of the room, hiding behind some young girls, periodically popping up and yelling, "Vengeance, vengeance," and then dropping back down behind some of the girls.
He did have on his war bonnet, did he?
So I don't, when you talk about like some of the quotes where this was a circus last night, well, the people that made it a circus are the people that were upset about this decision. But boards make decisions. And again, I will point out, like I said last week, Johnny McDaniel requested this buyout. I've talked to 2 different board members who said they went in the fall and tried to kind of work through some of the differences. And at both meetings with Mr. McDaniel, he kind of got agitated and he said, "Just buy me out." Now, that was back in November. Just buy me out. Well, I think it's incumbent on a superintendent of schools to learn to work with the people that are elected.
Well, what did Nicholas Lilios? How did
He voted not to do the buyout, even though he negotiated it.
So at one time he was for the buyout, right?
Johnny McDaniel asked for the buyout. He asked Mr. Lilios to give him the buyout, and so Mr. Lilios did. And then all of this stuff popped up.
I think it's probably problematic for us to speculate on what conversations happened before Johnny McDaniel asked for that buyout. I mean, obviously that didn't happen in a vacuum. He didn't walk in one day and just said, "Hey, buy me out." There were lots of going on. There was lots of friction there.
Was there
Who's
investigation?
behind it and who's not? I'm not trying to.
But when you say behind it implies something nefarious.
That's the heart of the debate. That's what we're not privy to.
Well, let me
right
ask you a
now.
question, Franklin. At whose discretion do the principals in all of our schools work?
I assume the director of schools.
The director of schools. And how long are their contracts for?
Generally 1 year contracts.
Year to
at a
year.
time.
So every single principal in the county system operates at Johnny, not Johnny, but whoever the superintendent operates at their whim on a year-to-year basis. So why is it so unreasonable that a superintendent would have that same requirement on them to the school board?
Well, you're arguing about whether or not there's ought to be a 1 year contract.
No. What I'm saying is they're implying that because a majority on the board decided that they needed to go in a different direction, that somehow a wrong has been committed. My point is that's just the way the world works.
That's not the look.
Vengeance is mine, Franklin. You think does that portray a proper attitude towards a board decision? Vengeance is mine because I lost a vote.
Well, as I understood that concept, that comment, and I don't know who made it, okay, because I wasn't there.
Christy Critchfield is quoted in the Free Press as having said it.
As I understood that comment, it was a reference to a suggestion that the desire to get rid of Director McDaniel was an act of vengeance by somebody on the board member.
Christy said it. Vengeance is mine. I will
understand
get
that,
you.
but that was the comment about that. That was what. Now, again, I'm not taking a side on this because, well, frankly, I don't think we're getting all the information.
I agree.
So I'm not comfortable taking that position on it. But what I do think is that suggestion has been a thread woven all through this discussion, that there was an intent to get Johnny McDaniel, and that's what a lot of people believe. Whether that's true or false is a different question. I think that's a motivating factor for a lot of people in their opinions, in the depth of their feelings about this issue. And obviously, a lot of people who were there. I'm not going to say it. I don't think you would say everybody who was there was in bad faith with their belief in the director.
No, I think the vast majority of the people that were there have been given a certain set of information, and they believe it, and they're very supportive, and I understand that. My problem is some of the people who I to be honest, I think put this whole thing together. There's an administrator that says they were at a conference in Nashville in January, and a former school board member called and discussed the buyout plan with Mr. McDaniel in January. So personally, I actually think this whole thing may have been a setup to create this kind of issue.
I don't know.
Why would he want to be bought out?
Well, I can understand why he wants to be
understand
bought
that
out. His part I understand.
He's tired of working?
No, a director, in order to function effectively, needs the support of the board. If you don't have it, irrespective
He
of whose
almost
fault
had
it
it.
is,
He only needed one more vote, Franklin. Can't you smile and be friendly enough to get one more vote in a period of time?
If you remember a few years back, we had an incredibly contentious relationship going on with the Cleveland City School Board, where their board was divided up. Same thing. They ended up with somebody leaving, not the last one, the one before that's who I'm talking about. They had a terrible relationship.
Yeah, but in this case, you had that situation for years, and it was a 4-3 vote. As I've said, Ms. Critchfield was on the winning side of that 4-3 vote, and she never seemed to have a problem with 4-3 votes then. Well, there was an election, and there was a change on the board, and that majority shifted. So the way I see this is the same power structure that just really doesn't like losing. And so now we're going to tear everybody apart in order to, I guess, get our way. Because when you look at this has been damaging to the system. Now, Mr. McDaniel, I think, was elegant about it and tried his best to kind of make this peaceful. I will say, and I said this last week, for example, when Nick Lilios said, look, we need to build a school, we don't have the money to build a school, the county commission doesn't even have the ability to borrow the money to build a school, Mr. McDaniel, will you give us a prioritized list of our budget so we could look at it and see where we might find some savings that could be put back in order to help build this school? Mr. McDaniel refused to provide a prioritized list. I personally find that to be less than cooperative with a new board.
I'm not really contradicting you about that, John, but I will have to say I haven't seen that comment made publicly at any of these meetings that he refused to do that. I haven't seen that. You'd think that would get reported.
Why would you think that?
Well,
why would you think
they've reported everything else?
No, they report. We've talked about recently. The reporting in our community is very opinionated. Let's say, if someone is liked. Our problem, and I've said this for years, in all kinds of our media, they pick a side. And once they pick a side, they will give you the facts from that side, but they sort of forget to give you the facts on the other side. I can tell you that happened in an open board meeting, and that discussion went on, are you or are you not going to give us a prioritized list? And they never got a prioritized list. Well, I personally find that to be a very reasonable request. Hey, show us what's really important and show us what's not really important. For example, if I had a conference in Disney World and I was planning on taking 100 people from the system at a cost of $300,000, I probably would think that wasn't a priority to spend that much money on. I just pulled those numbers out of the air. So,
well, it looks like it's over with. Goodbye, Mr. Johnny McDaniel. So long. Happy trails to you, right? Is that what we got to say?
He's a good man. I think he cares for the kids. He tried to do a good job. I think things are tough in politics.
So you think we ought to have elected
I've always thought we ought to have an elected superintendent.
Instead of appointed superintendents. What's your opinion, right?
Well, you don't get a 1-year contract with that.
No.
So
you get your 4-year contract with that. I did find it interesting, though, that the principals don't have the luxury of a 4-year contract, and they serve.
That's true for every teacher, also.
You're right, teachers and principals. So I find it interesting that we're fussing because we want the highest paid person in the system to have a 4-year luxury, but we don't want to give that same luxury to the teachers and the principals. And I can tell you, those principals, they feel that pressure. They see one school that they at least feel is being favored over another school. They know that if they speak out on it, it's probably going to get worse rather than better. They know that they can actually be moved out of their position.
I think the pressure that they feel is to show gains in academic performance, because that is a big benchmark for their evaluation.
That and football games.
Well, that's a community thing more than a system thing, don't you think?
All right, we got to move on. Enough from the school superintendent. They've argued about it for months now.
I'd like to get John's real quickly feeling on the piece of legislation that Senator Bell introduced this week. Past week in Nashville.
I think it's great. I think if you can pass the law exam, you ought to be a lawyer.
He's introduced a bill
you don't need to go to school.
To require the Tennessee Supreme Court to admit anyone as an attorney who passes the bar exam, whether they've been to college or law school or not. What do you think about that?
I think it's an interesting concept. I know I've said on the.
We'll take it if you'll also extend it to dentistry.
Well, I knew that's where that was going to go. I will say that dentistry, medicine, things like that have a certain physical skill set that has to go with it, which is a different thing to master.
Psychiatry, then.
Well, actually, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor, so he has to master the skill set of medical doctor before he's now psychologist.
Only because we require them to have degrees from.
Well, that's true. Yeah. But now you will have to admit, because I've asked you this before, under law, you do not have to be an attorney to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court, do you?
No, but you do have to be an attorney to be a judge in Tennessee by statute.
I understand. So somewhere our framers didn't think it was necessary to be a lawyer to actually serve on the highest court in the land.
The last person to meet that requirement would have been
18.
Was Earl Warren a lawyer?
I don't think Earl was.
He was a governor of California.
I don't think he was a lawyer. And that's interesting, because in Mike's scenario, you would have to pass the bar. So if you pass the bar, if you assume the bar is the measuring stick for whether you understand how to be a lawyer, they have at least done that. Under the rules of the Supreme Court, you don't even have to pass the bar to be on the Supreme Court.
What are they trying to prove there? That it's just really simple to be an attorney, Franklin?
Well, a lot of people think that, I'm sure, but
I
am curious. There was a lot of speculation as to what the motivation behind that was.
I will tell you.
I have been hearing particularly from the Republican side of the House, I've been hearing for many, many years that there are way too many lawyers now.
Well, I was going to say, from my end, I will tell you the thing that I would be very concerned about would be the guys in prison that have nothing to do but sit around with the law library and read law books.
There's a significant constitutional issue. Mike's bill actually directed the Supreme Court to do something which I'm not sure is constitutional.
Well, but I think, don't you think in the post-Obama era we've moved beyond being constitutional?
No.
I mean, the president doesn't seem to be obligated by that minor little document called the Constitution.
Well, and that's what we have courts for, to sort out, and that's what's happening, and the courts will determine whether the president was operating constitutionally.
The court has determined, but now
a district court has, and there's a process.
Put forward probably one of the most novel defenses we've ever heard. If this judge's order is upheld, it will damage the power of the federal government. Now, the whole point of our government was to protect the states from the federal government. Now he's claiming that if the states are protected, it will hurt the federal government.
So that's a novel argument in and of itself, John.
It's his argument. That was the administration's reply.
Given that the executive order didn't really do anything to the states.
Actually, it does a lot to the states, Franklin. That was what the judge based his order on. He didn't rule on the merits of what Obama did, but what he did say was enforcing it would cause the states to spend huge amounts of money, and that would do irreparable harm to the state.
We're getting into something I was going to bring up a little later, but that's okay. But we can go ahead and get into it now about Mr. Obama's Department of Human Services. What's going to happen? Do you think immigration is going
Homeland Security?
Homeland Security. Let's talk about that.
Well, the Senate.
Joe Manchin's going to back the department.
Well, there's 8 senators that have said they are opposed to Obama's executive action, but all 8 are voting to uphold the filibuster.
Well, actually, what happened yesterday, though, is the Senate leader Mitch McConnell has agreed to separate for votes the vote on funding Homeland Security.
That's good.
And that it is good. It should happen.
But the scaremonger's not going to put up with that.
Well, that's what the president wants to happen.
No, he doesn't.
No,
he doesn't.
Yes, it is.
Okay. I don't think he does.
And what's happened at that point is that the House has already passed a bill So now they can go to conference once a vote happens in the Senate.
Didn't we discuss this last week? And I said all the Senate Democrats had to do was take up the bill so that we could actually amend it.
Well,
so they were the ones blocking it.
Now that it's been separated, that will happen.
But you're basically admitting that it was the Democrats that were blocking the Homeland Security funding
John,
bill.
Anybody who's been listening to me the last year and a half in here has never once heard me argue for filibusters.
Well, Franklin, I'm not sure about that. Let's go ask both of them.
We only have to. Well, given that one of them's your wife, then that really isn't fair, John.
Now I'm starting to rethink that whole divorce thing, Franklin.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, separating this, Mr. Obama, he can't scare America. Well,
first of all,
he was trying.
Obama didn't join the two issues together.
Well,
you mean funding?
No. Linking the immigration bill to the funding of the Department of Homeland Security was not something the president
Franklin, was the immigration bill going to cost any money? Was his executive order going to cost money to do? I kind of thought that was a rhetorical question.
No, it's not a rhetorical question. It's a fair question, but it's also a complicated one.
Yes or no, Franklin? Does it cost money to do what he said to do? They had to print. They've already spent. As a matter of fact, they've already spent billions, apparently, even though it's now being upheld, or withheld.
Inside the budgets that have already been approved for different agencies, I'm sure some of that money gets spent on that. It doesn't require new legislation or new expenditure.
It wasn't authorized by Congress. It was not a legally authorized expenditure.
They already had a budget.
But not for that,
What they do with
Franklin.
their budget is an executive
Franklin,
function,
locally,
not a
that's not
one.
true. And you know that because we've talked about it on a local issue. When the funding for a department is let, if they decide they don't want to spend a line item for what it's written down, they're supposed to come back before the county commission and request to move that money from one line item to another thing. That's exactly what the Republicans were dealing with. He put an executive order in place that was going to cost billions of dollars, and they simply said in funding, we're not going to fund that portion of unauthorized, illegal activity.
Actually, what they did was say, we're not going to fund the Department of Homeland Security.
That's not true.
Unless
that's not true, Franklin, and that is the
talking
lie.
about the Senate bill.
The Senate never brought it up.
Because there is a bill on the House that they're
yes, and it fully funded
now.
the DHS except for the illegal new activity that Obama illegally put in place.
And that's the debate.
Right.
Whether or
no,
not.
There's no debate on the Senate side because the Democrats filibustered 4 times in a row. They were the obstructionists.
There's no question about that, John.
Well, there was
you
last
say that
week
like you've uncovered
because last
some nugget.
week you denied that they were obstructionists.
No, I didn't. What I said was that this is exactly what I've been saying for a year and a half, that the way that they're attaching these things to different measures that have nothing to do with each other is not furthering the interests of the nation. That's what I've said. And I said the same thing when it was happening before.
Franklin, I have said for probably a month now that it's the Democrats that are holding the funding for DHS up, and you denied that it was the Democrats and said it was the Republicans' fault. Now, apparently, we're revising history, and now you've said all along.
And the Senate has finally stepped up this week.
You mean the Democrats finally are they agreeing that they're going to quit filibustering?
No, Senator McConnell has agreed.
How many times did the Democrats block moving ahead on discussion on a DHS funding vote?
Four times.
4
I
times.
believe.
So 4 different times. Even though they said we don't like some of these provisions and we want to amend them, they blocked any discussion or amendment.
Is, John, that none of us ever want to get past the who did what function when they all do the same thing.
Actually, all the Republicans in the Senate wanted to get past it, and it was the Democrats that blocked it 4 times in a row.
Well, you just agreed with what I said. All the Republicans wanted to take
up debate.
Okay.
Wanted to do their job.
That's the point. Now, what do I say? There are some issues, national security being one of them, where we should not inject all these other political issues.
The House bill didn't. It funded everything about national security. It just didn't fund his illegal power grab. The only thing. And by the way, Franklin, your wonderful president that wants to reach out just vetoed the Keystone XL pipeline,
yes, he did.
A bipartisan bill that passed with Republican and Democrat support
yes, he
and
did.
union support.
Yes, he did.
Well, you
Well, it
sound like
doesn't
you're
seem
proud
like
of
he's
that.
that interested in bipartisanship then. Bipartisan bill, 6 years in the making, Democrat support, significant Democrat support, labor union support, and he vetoed it to favor his wealthy environmental supporters and crazy wackos.
That's awful.
It is awful.
No, it's not. It's a bad deal for America, and you can't
According
get past.
to who? You and some of your liberals? Because the majority,
No, not me
Republican
and my
and
liberals.
Democrat.
You know, it'd be fine if the
Do you
Republican
believe in
Party-
democracy or
what
not?
do I believe? I believe in truth, John.
Well, did the
I believe in
Democrats
truth.
cross the
And the
aisle
truth
and
is that the
support
Republican
Republicans?
Party has told one lie after another about the Keystone XL pipeline.
You mean these
Lie, lie, lie.
You mean the State
It doesn't
Department
create
review?
thousands of American jobs. It doesn't help lower costs in America.
Actually,
it
Obama's
it
own
increases our
State
dependence
Department
on
review
oil.
said
It's
42,000 jobs. His own State Department review, the Democrat State Department under his Democrat
It
administration.
did not say 42,000 American jobs, John. And
Frankly,
that's
you're
another one of the lies y'all keep saying.
arguing with his own State
No,
Department.
it's not. That's not what they said. 42,000 jobs, but a huge chunk of those were Canadian jobs.
His own State Department recommended passage of it, Franklin. His
huge
own
chunk of
State
those were
Department.
Canadian
Why
jobs.
won't you
Right.
just admit that he's
Why don't you
kowtowing
just
to a
admit
bunch of
that-
rich
why don't you just
environmentalists?
admit that it has nothing to do with American jobs and it's got everything
Franklin,
to do with
will
your
it
desire to continue propping up oil
Franklin,
companies?
how important would one job be to one family?
It'd be really important to
So
that family.
if it creates
Thank
one
God,
job-
the President of the United States has a bigger job, though, which is looking out for the long-term interest of our nation.
Do you think the pipeline would reduce 10 cents the price of gasoline in America?
No, not even 1/10 of 1 cent.
Okay, so you don't think it would affect pricing at all?
No.
Why?
Well, first of all, most of that oil is being shipped overseas.
Well, wait a minute. That's the.
But if we're in a
that's the
global market, it increases the global supply. And I
right.
guess somewhere in your liberal education, you learned that increased supply means decreased price.
Number two, the reason that price is decreased right now is because in the Middle East, some countries that are trying to help us right now are keeping their pumping up at a higher level.
Actually,
they could raise the price.
Franklin,
They could raise the price in 3 months
The
with
reason
no problem.
that's not
if
true.
That's what
The
they wanted to
reason
do.
the price has gone down is because despite Obama's actions on federal land,
Yeah.
state and local land have seen huge increases
That's
in
correct,
domestic
John.
production.
That is correct.
And the oil supply not only has gone up
However-
worldwide, we are
however-
now the leading producer
That's
of natural
correct.
gas in the world.
That's correct.
On state
Now,
and
you said
private
natural
land.
gas.
Not, now, I
You
said
mean
that.
oil.
No, right now we're not in oil. We are in natural gas.
No, we are in oil now,
We're not
actually.
the leading in oil yet. We're on the move to become the leading, and if he'd get out of the way,
If we keep
in
fracking,
the shale
we'll get
fields,
there.
with fracking, we would get there. Of course, I will tell you that as soon as he announced that he was putting the Alaskan oil fields off limits, gas prices went up 20 cents in the next 2 weeks.
Well, that also happens every year this time of year. So that's not a big surprise. But what is happening is the Saudis have made a decision that they're not going to cut their drilling back, which would have raised the price. And they have the complete ability to do that.
You know why they did that, Franklin?
Yes,
because they do have a little bit of sense, and they know that if they do that,
Because-
it puts more pressure on us to increase fracking and to increase U.S.
Actually,
oil
the
production.
reason they're doing it is because they're trying to cut revenues to
Look,
ISIS.
Franklin, it's real simple. We don't need them anymore. That's the real problem for the Saudis. We don't have to have them anymore because on state and local land, we have actually figured out we have out in the Dakotas, we actually have 3 times the oil reserve that the Saudi Arabians do. Now, this president is now through the EPA trying to limit our ability to frack and retrieve that
Sure,
oil. He's
sure.
also putting the Alaskan fields off of
and you
off
think and you
limits.
think that there's nothing wrong with having a significant examination of what the impact
Actually,
of
it's been
fracking is.
fracking's been around for 40 years. It's been examined and examined and examined. Here's the problem.
Did you see the
Franklin.
reports that came out last week, John?
who are they from? The Scientists for Responsible Citizenship?
The United States Geological Survey.
Well, Franklin, I know that here's my problem for you and for Obama is
not a problem for me or Obama.
For about 3 years, your president withheld the Keystone XL pipeline because he said we're waiting on his State Department to finish their review. They finished their review. They recommended going ahead, and then he said we need more study. So quite frankly, I'm not real interested in study after study after study, because what happens with you liberals is you all are so egotistical that when a study doesn't tell you what you want, you just start a new study. Matter of fact, the worst part is you fund a study to find what you want.
What we're committed on is looking at the long term instead of the next quarterly profit statement, which is where the Republicans get
I'll tell you,
down.
the only profit statement you ought to be worried about is Al Gore's profit in all of the green energy companies that he invested in, that he's become a billionaire off of, even though the taxpayer has lost on all of those.
Boy, you are really desperate if you've got to reach back 15 years to find somebody to criticize.
Al Gore?
Al's
He's one
with
of
us
our
every
own.
day.
All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
Check into cash.
The cash you need is closer than you think.
Get an auto title loan today for up to $2,500 at Check Into Cash.
You drive home with the cash in your pocket.
Visit Check Into Cash for an auto title loan today, or get a payday advance for up to $425. Call toll-free 877-262-CASH. Title loan amount determined by value of car and ability to repay. Borrowers often use payday advances over a period of months, which can be expensive. Restrictions apply. See store for details.
Guns, guns, and more guns. That's right, folks. U.S. Money Shops has just received a large shipment of pre-owned Glock 22s, 23s, and the awesome Beretta 8040D Cougar. These guns are law enforcement trade-ins that start at just $379.99 while supplies last. At U.S. Money Shops, there's no shortage of guns, so if you're looking for a great deal on a newer pre-owned gun, then check us out first.
Buy or sell or coin today, the better way at U.S. Money Shops.
Visit usmoneyshops.com for the location nearest you.
If you need a little green, Lending Frog is making deals. He'll lend you cash on any kind of wheels. Borrow just a little, or you can borrow big. Lending Frog is a new financial gig. It's hip to hop into cash. LendingFrog.com is making a splash. Dig it, dig it. Dig it, dig it.
Saturday mornings, tune in to The Wrestling Mat, hosted by Ron Moore. Ron and his guests will review Cleveland, Bradley, and Walker Valley's wrestling programs.
Hello, my name is Andy Figglestaller with Ed Jacobs & Associates. We are an employee benefit and insurance broker in business for the past 20 years. The new healthcare law, also known as Obamacare, has finally arrived. The law is complex and the choices are confusing. You have questions, we have the answers. It is our passion to find cost-effective solutions for every client. The solutions will be different for every person or business. Let our knowledge, experience, and passion go to work for you. Contact us today and let us assist you through this process. Our phone number is 423-473-0202, or you can find us on the web at edjacobs.com.
Dr. Christopher Chase, with Associates in Plastic Surgery, now offers his patients the convenience of a Cleveland office at 2350 North Ocoee Street. Dr. Chase specializes for the ladies in breast augmentation, including lifts, reconstructions, and reductions, also tummy tucks or mommy makeovers, and facial rejuvenation, including facelifts, eyelids, brows, nose, and he also offers Botox procedures. Check out Dr. Christopher Chase. He is certified by the American Board of Surgery, the American Board of Plastic Surgery. He's a member of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons and the American Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. Check their website out at aprs.md. That's aprs.md. Call for your convenient appointment in Cleveland at 624-0021. 624-0021. 2350 North Ocoee. That's Dr. Christopher Chase.
If you're looking for a home, apartment, or office space, Jones Properties provides residential and commercial properties in the heart of the Southeast that will fulfill any need. Plus, Jones Properties is one of the fastest growing firms in the area, which offers you more security. When you're ready for a home, apartment, or in need for commercial office space, it makes sense to call Jones Properties first at 472-4000. Plus, you can get additional information by logging on to the website at www.jonesproperties.biz. Jones Properties is also looking to invest in properties. So if you have a property that you need to sell, call the professional team at Jones Properties first. They'll help you find the perfect property for whatever your needs. Call today 472-4000. And don't forget to keep up with Jones Properties on Facebook.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Do the twist and it goes like this. Come on, let's twist again. Like we did last summer. Yeah, let's twist again. Like we did last year.
All right, we're back again. We're back again. Like we were last Wednesday. We're back again. All right, we've talked about the school board, and we've talked about a little bit of Obama already. What about immigration, real quick? Is immigration, is it going to stay on hold until Obama's out of office, or is he going to be able to pass another magic wand and keep everything
Well, it's
moving?
going to take about a year to year and a half for the case to work its way up through the appellate courts, probably to the Supreme Court, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to wind out most of his term for sure.
Well, unless.
But let me say this: tons and tons of Republicans agree that we need a comprehensive reform of our immigration system.
Yes, we all agree.
Pass something.
Fine.
It would.
Okay.
It would. You know what? It wouldn't matter if a comprehensive bill gets passed. They can get rid of the president's executive order. Now, I understand you disagree with it. Fine. There's a lawsuit going on to deal with whether it was constitutional or not, and that will eventually work its way through the courts. That's no excuse for doing nothing in the meantime. Do something. And try and solve the problem.
It's interesting, though, when I made that argument about the fact that Obama and the Democrats controlled both houses of Congress his first 2 years, and if it was so important, how come they wasted all that time on Obamacare, which the public didn't want? You didn't ever really seem to think it was that important at that time, but now it's the Republicans' responsibility. And I'm not disagreeing
you've
with
heard
you.
me say on here several times that there were elements of immigration reform that were so incredibly obvious that anybody ought to be able to pass it. Okay, for example, and I will say this: as I understand it, there's now a new proposal coming through the Republican side of the Senate that, in effect, will go ahead and pass legislation on the Dreamers, so to speak, that allow them to stay here. Most everybody thinks that's a good idea. It's about 75-80% approval with the public. Most Republicans think it's a good idea. It's just been bogged down in all this partisan politics.
Actually, it was
that needs to happen.
It was bogged down because when Marco Rubio, about 2 years ago, tried to bring it up, the president torpedoed him publicly.
It's
and
also
pulled the
true
rug
that
out from
Marco
under him.
Rubio then switched his position on it.
Well, Franklin, your president
Didn't he?
pulled the rug out from
He
under
did
him
that,
for
didn't
no reason other than politics. So for a president to come and go, oh, this is so important, we've got to do it, he has torpedoed all kinds of efforts to get it done.
John, what
and
did
he
I
had his
just
own,
say?
I understand.
Just do it.
Well, I think
Just
we
do
will,
it.
Franklin. But,
Okay.
Here's the hard
Great,
part.
and you'll get the credit for it if you do it.
John Boehner
It's
said
not that hard.
back in the fall before the president announced it, which, by the way, he waited until after the election to announce it. I'm sure there was no cynical reason that he did that. But John Boehner said, we're going to take it up. We're going to do it. What's the president do? He steps in and takes this action anyway.
Just do it. The president's action has no effect whatsoever on the ability of the Congress.
Just do
to
it.
something.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Well,
do
Franklin,
it.
right now,
I've got an
It's for example, it's incredibly obvious that it is totally stupid for us to deport somebody or make them leave who's just been here and gotten an advanced degree in science, technology, engineering, or math, and make them leave.
Yeah, but the
That's
problem
incredibly
is you're
stupid.
right, Franklin.
But we're doing that.
But
so fix it.
The president's order doesn't fix that. It takes all of the ignorant, uneducated people that aren't going to contribute and gives them citizenship.
And the president said my order will be void as soon as you pass
But
a bill.
the damage
pass
will
a
already
bill.
be done.
No, it won't be if
Franklin,
you pass a bill. You had years to do it.
Franklin, his own people, in their response to the judge's ruling last week, is now asking for a stay against that judge's stay. And what it means is they will get to go ahead and do his executive order that you can't undo, which is exactly what he said. He said, the reason I gave the stay was because once you let this genie out of the bottle, you can't put it back in.
And the president has gone on record as
As
saying
wanting to
he
let
will
the genie out
he
of the
will
bottle.
rescind the order if a bill gets
You're
passed.
missing the point, Franklin.
Pass a bill.
If this judge hadn't intervened, they would have started letting the genie out of the bottle last week.
Actually, the point is, John, that the president has said he's going to do something if nobody else is going
I'm
to do
sorry,
anything.
he's not an emperor.
Do something.
He's not an emperor, Franklin.
Why won't he
Do
pass?
something.
Matter of fact,
why won't he pass the pipeline then?
Because it's a bad deal.
But
according to who?
Here's the problem, Frank. Now wait a minute.
and
Wait
a
a
lot
minute.
of other people.
Wait a minute, Franklin. Let's discuss that for a second. You have, you can't get a bill through Congress. And when he had his own majorities, he couldn't get a bill through Congress on immigration. So the president picks up his pen, and without really constitutional authority, by his own admission, he said, 32 different times that he didn't have the authority to do what he did. He writes out an executive order, has no congressional oversight. His own IRS director has now said that billions of dollars will go to these illegal immigrants from taxpayers because that's the way he did it without any review on the front end. He does all of that, but the Keystone Bill comes up through Congress, is passed by a bipartisan majority. 62 people in the Senate voted to support it, and he vetoes that. So he takes action
John,
where there is no consensus
wouldn't
and
say
crams
that
it
the
down our throat, but where there is consensus, he vetoes
You
it.
wouldn't say that the exercise of that veto was unconstitutional, would
No,
you?
but my point is he went against the will of the people. So
Okay.
he goes against the will of the people. Basically, he thinks he's a dictator. He thinks that whatever he wants is the most important, and I won't be held back by the laws of the country. When he gets a bill that's bipartisan and he doesn't like it, he vetoes it. When he can't get a bill because there isn't bipartisan support of it, he does it anyway. The man doesn't respect the Constitution.
He wants
Now,
to
John,
keep chaos going.
Now, John,
Franklin,
you can't have it both ways.
He wants to bring
Either
America
the
down.
veto's constitutional or it's not. It is
The
clearly.
veto is constitutional,
Okay.
but it's
So
undemocratic.
that has nothing.
It's
So that
undemocratic.
had nothing to do with
He
constitution.
doesn't respect the Constitution is based on the fact that his executive order was unconstitutional. I will amend my statement to say he also doesn't respect the voice of the people because he had a bipartisan bill that came through both houses of Congress, was endorsed by his own State Department report, and he vetoed it because he personally wanted to, I guess, give in to Tom Steyer and his $63 million donation to the Democratic Party.
All right.
The breadth of your ability to link things together that have nothing to do with each other is just awesome. I mean,
wow.
Those things have nothing to do with each other whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm
and
sure.
And you
Franklin,
managed to put them all on the same page.
well, let me see if
That's
I got
really
you
something.
straight. Apparently, the Koch brothers' $13 million has everything to do with everything the Republicans do, but Tom Steyer's $63 million to Democrat
Actually, John,
candidates
there's one person sitting in this room, and only one, who has persistently and loudly for 2-3 years now said the big problem is how much money we have flowing into politics.
And every time
and
you
I
said
don't
it, you've
remember
mentioned-
saying it's Republicans or
Actually,
Democrats.
you-
I said it's everybody.
You've actually specifically mentioned the Koch brothers, but I don't ever remember you saying Tom Steyer, even though he gave about five
you
times
have not
as much.
one time heard me
5
cheer
times as
for
much.
extra money going into
But
the
you've
Democratic
never
Party. Not one
personally
time.
criticized Tom Steyer.
In fact, I'm the only person here.
Well,
who's been
Franklin, how
consistent
is it
about
that you were aware of the Koch brothers but not Tom Steyer?
I didn't know that name.
He
But
gave
that-
about 5 times as much as the Koch brothers did.
John, well, actually, that's not true.
$63 million. They gave 13.
That's not true. Because,
60
because no, this is
Here,
this.
let me divide
no,
it for you, Franklin.
this-
Let me figure
I can
that
do the
out.
math, John, but here's
Okay.
what you won't do. What you act like is the $1.5 billion the Koch brothers put into their 501c4 to influence elections, like that doesn't count. You're only talking about the ones that was directly given to the parties. The rest of it is magically not important.
I'm sorry, it was only 4.84 times as much as the Koch brothers.
And as I just said, that was a completely misleading statement because the Koch brothers gave vastly more money.
Frank,
the Koch brothers are actually giving money to influence what happens in Tennessee elections.
If you want to go there, we'll go there. Let's total
I'm
up.
not standing up for him.
Soros. Bloomberg promised $50 million.
Who's standing up for them? I'm not.
Bloomberg gave $50 million
John,
on gun control issues alone.
I'm just going to say it again. You wanted all this money in your politics, and now you've got it. It's a bad idea.
My problem is,
I don't
Franklin,
care if it's
I
George
don't have a problem with
Soros
it.
or the Koch
You're
brothers.
right.
They're stealing elections,
They're not
and they're
stealing
rigging,
elections.
and all of them.
Franklin?
All of them.
elections?
All these people that are pumping incredible amounts of money into the electoral process, and if you think that's not intending to influence people.
You don't think immigration has anything to do with influencing elections?
Oh, it probably does.
So, Franklin,
but I'll tell you this. For once, the President of the United States is on the same side as the National Chamber of Commerce
Franklin,
that we need to fix
let
this
me ask you a
problem.
question then. When McCain,
God knows what liberal, wide-eyed, crazy people they are in the Chamber of Commerce.
When McCain-Feingold was passed, then you were opposed to the fact that that unions weren't included in the restrictions, right?
No, I was in favor of McCain-Feingold's concept of limiting money into
Why
elections.
were unions excluded from McCain-Feingold? They gave, that cycle when that was being debated, they gave close to $300 to $400 million to candidates that same year.
I'm opposed.
What,
I'm
do you know why?
opposed to.
Right.
Which part of this are you
Well,
not
then
getting?
I'm asking you.
I'm opposed to
then
it.
You would have supported including union contributions in McCain-Feingold.
Everybody gets limited. Yes.
Well, here was the problem. All of the Democrats didn't support that because all of that union money went to Democrats. My point is, Franklin,
are you not
all are
grasping
only
here?
opposed to Republican spending,
Don't
not
give me
Democrats.
the you all. I'm here telling you I'm opposed to it.
Well, maybe you need
Why
to
don't
call
you join
Harry
with
Reid.
me in it?
Look, Franklin,
Join with me and say right now you're opposed to big donations
I'm
to
actually
political
not.
campaigns. Exactly right. We finally got to the truth.
I've always said I'm not.
Okay,
but my
then
point.
just admit it. Don't give me
Franklin,
this crap about.
Here's my point.
It's the Republicans versus the Democrats.
It is.
You're for it.
The problem
And the
is
reason
every
you're for
time
it
you
is
all
because you
here's
can come
the
up
problem,
with more
Franklin.
money on your side.
You may or may not be ethical about it. I think you are. But the problem is people like Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, every time they've made your argument to control spending, they've only wanted to control conservative spending. They excluded the unions.
Getting the money out.
Well, then talk to Harry Reid because apparently he only knows the Koch brothers. He doesn't know who Tom Steyer is either. Oh, by the way, Harry Reid actually accepted money from the Koch brothers as well in his last reelection.
Okay.
And then had the gall to go out and criticize.
Here's what I don't think. I don't think if the system's screwed up and corrupt from the root to the branch, that we're going to get anywhere arguing about who tries to play the system we have.
Well, frankly,
we need to change the system.
Here's your problem. If you follow the opposite side
it's
of that.
not my problem. It's an American problem.
Yes, but listen to me for a
Join
second.
with me in solving
Let's get rid of
John.
all of it, and we'll go with some of Obama, even though he at one point he was for it and at one point he was against it. We'll go with public financing because that worked so well for the Soviet Union's elections. We'll just have government spend the money, and then they'll tell us who the best candidate is.
All right. Let's move on, guys. Back to your corners. Internet. The FCC, they're talking about starting to pass a new bill to regulate internet. What's going on? Anybody know?
We can't have people actually disseminating information as they want. We have to control it. So the government wants to tax it and control it. Franklin,
it's got to be around a new period.
The proposal that they're dealing with is industry's request that they be able to have fast lanes and slow lanes on there, and that they be able to control all
Who will decide who's on the fast lane?
Said, no, everybody ought to have the same access. What's the problem with that?
What's the problem with it now?
Well, that's the point. We have that now. That's what we're trying to keep. A free and open internet.
By letting the government regulate it. How's that worked out for healthcare?
Pretty darn well.
How's that worked out for your
driver's license?
How's that worked out?
Pretty darn well, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Healthcare's gone down.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Franklin.
Well, let me give you an example. Let me give you a couple. Let me give you a couple.
Has anything he promised happened? Don't give me one promise.
The uninsured rate in Kentucky has fallen from 20.5% to 9.8%.
Yeah, they're all on the government dole. The taxpayers paying for it.
The uninsured rate in Arkansas has fallen from 22.5% to 11.5%.
Because they've all gone on the backs of the taxpayer.
Healthcare expense has risen at the lowest rate in 35 years.
But it was supposed to go down.
Did it?
He promised it would go down.
Lowest rate in 35 years.
The lowest rate of increase, Franklin. He promised it would go. Where's the $2,500 per family that they were going to save?
The highest area of people dying from not having insurance are in the reddest of red states.
Franklin, do you want to protect the poorest of the poor?
Yes, I do.
All right, let me just read you something, because this is actually coming out of, it's a study.
I'd also like to protect the hospitals who are dependent on this and who are losing their shirts.
Americans making $133 to 400% of the federal poverty level are now 52% going to owe the IRS money this year. They will owe on average $530. So the poorest of the poor, because of the Obamacare subsidies being mismanaged and figured wrong, are now going to have to send $530 back to the IRS.
800,000 taxpayers who enrolled in the insurance policy through healthcare.gov received enormous tax information from the government and were urged on Friday to hold off on filing tax returns until the error
because they can repair the error.
They're going to owe money back. So the poorest of the poor, because of your man's incompetence, are now going to actually have to send more money back to the federal government.
Except that the IRS indicated that they were going to correct that.
How are they going to correct it, Franklin?
It
was erroneous. So here's what
it was an error.
You're right.
Of course they can correct it.
So who's going to make up the $530 per person? The American taxpayer. So the IRS makes a mistake. They pay money out they shouldn't have paid out, but they go, oh, well, we don't want to ask for it back because it's too harsh to ask for it back. So guess what? American taxpayer, you reach into your pocket and pay it out.
That's not what they said, John.
Tell us what happened, Franklin.
No, it's a clear mistake.
You mean incompetence?
Okay, fine. Okay. And you know what, John? I think that's a perfectly valid thing for you to be critical about.
You know what, Franklin?
And you know what's not valid?
What?
The suggestion that everybody who's gotten Obamacare is somehow just leeching off the government. It's not true. Lots of those people are paying premiums. They're just getting some additional support to make it affordable.
Well, Franklin, guess what? I talk to people all the time.
Tons of people's children are on their plans now because of this.
You mean 26-year-olds, 26-year-old college graduates?
24-year-old ones. You know what? That's extremely popular, John.
Of course it's popular, Franklin. Spending someone else's money is always popular.
Guess what? They're still paying a premium for it.
Franklin, to quote Margaret Thatcher, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money.
John, it would be so nice if you could actually define socialism, and that isn't it.
Well, Franklin, I'll tell you one thing that's socialism. I talk to people all the time my age, 52, 53, 55, and on their insurance now, they are paying for maternity care. Guess what? We're not going to have kids at 55. The only reason we're paying maternity care is so that you can buy votes for your Democrat buddies by paying for someone else's premium.
John, your insurance has hundreds of things in it that you don't have.
And
that's why you have insurance.
Before Obamacare, I could pick and choose. Now I can't.
Could you?
Yes, I could, Franklin.
My insurance went up. Anybody else's?
By the way, just so everybody...
You told me your insurance went down.
It did, as did the insurance guy who came in here verified.
All right, then what happened? Did it go back up?
It's gone up a little bit, but not as much as it was before we got it.
Yeah, what's your deductibles?
My deductible is higher, but my premium, when you balance the two of them out,
which means that when you have a problem, you'll have a higher
amount
of out-of-pocket.
No. Here's the situation. Let me finish. I was given 67 different options to pick from. I went through those 67 options on this marketplace, made the decision that which one was best for me. Now, what did I personally do? I took a little bit of a higher deductible, and I took lower premiums. Because most years, that's a good deal for me. Right. Now, if I have a catastrophic year, That's
Here's
true.
the problem,
I could pay
Franklin.
some more then.
A lot of
but
people.
that's not the norm.
A lot of people made that same decision, but you and I are in different situations.
Sure.
If you get a working mom and she has to take those lower premiums, she also has to accept that $3,000, $4,000, and $5,000 deductible. Guess what? When she does get sick, she can't pay that.
The problem
she
with that-
can't pay it, Franklin. It's that simple.
Okay.
So she doesn't.
Okay, John.
You know what she does? Because she can't pay it, she avoids going to the doctor because she can't pay it. And by the way, Franklin,
No,
just
but
so you
there were
have
options there too.
there
You
were
could take-
options, and all of them were bad.
No, they weren't, John.
Well, Franklin,
that's the nonsense.
Just so
that you spout out.
so you understand this, let me just tell you: under this Obamacare, the people that get the subsidy support, families of four earning less than $97,000 a year are available to get support. Single mothers with two children earning less than $80,000 a year get support. I'm thinking most people in Bradley County, where the average income is about $30,000, they don't think a family of four earning right at $100,000 a year ought to be getting a taxpayer subsidized health insurance plan. That's the problem with it.
Is that you?
I would question those numbers first of all. I don't think those are accurate.
Where'd you read that from? I know you got that from.
That came from the IRS.
Okay.
Because there are adjustments
But
in
based on the IRS's competency
No,
level,
you're
Franklin might be right.
No, what you're the problem with it is that there are differences in different states because there are adjustments on the cost of medical care.
Well, how is
in
that
different
fair
areas.
from one citizen to the other?
Well, of course it's fair.
How is it fair, Franklin? If a citizen in Tennessee gets it at one level and a citizen in Arkansas gets it at another level, that's not equal protection.
The problem is, John,
I'm
that
sorry,
we're
that's
providing
some
equal
obscure
access.
constitutional
No,
concept.
it's not an obscure constitutional concept. It's just meaningless in the context that you're using it. If you happen to be living in Manhattan and you go for an appendicitis to the hospital, the cost may be 8 times what it is here. So yeah, there is some adjustments that get made in different places, and then John takes that and projects that on the whole country. Well, that may not be applicable to Bradley County.
We
at
were
all.
talking about subsidies, Franklin. We weren't. Talking
We are
about
talking about subsidies. That's right.
Look,
but
Franklin,
there are regional.
We're making just right at $100,000 a year should not be getting government subsidies. That is a disaster. That is an unaffordable disaster.
My deductible is $4,000 now on my health care plan.
Okay.
I've just had I had surgery recently, gallbladder taken out. Had
So
to have
before you
tests
decided to have that surgery, you had to make sure you could come up with the $4,000.
Well, I've got a health savings account that I've got on the side
and is that
I established on the side to make sure I have plenty of money.
Is that an employer-provided plan? In your case?
Not my employer.
Not your employer. A family member, though.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not even Obamacare.
Well,
you don't have it.
I didn't need Obamacare before.
The point is
I had insurance
Obamacare
here.
mandates what plans he can pick from. That's the problem. It was all about control, government control.
No, his employer made that decision.
No, but it had to meet the 10 mandated things that every policy had to have, which includes pediatric dental care. Do you have any children?
No.
And it included maternity care. Are you all planning on having another baby?
No.
But yet you're paying for both of those services, even though they will never, ever use them.
Well, and I hope he never has coverage for cancer either. But, you know.
Franklin, you're missing the point.
No, it's
would he have chosen to have cancer coverage? Yes. Would he have chosen to have maternity and pediatric dental coverage?
Well, John,
no.
I want you. Here's the
let me
problem.
get
Here's
to
the
my
problem.
point.
It implies that beforehand you had all this choice and you didn't.
Well, one of the reasons you didn't have choice is because Democrats have blocked the ability to compete across state lines for insurance, which Republicans have supported for years.
The point is that you blame Obamacare for things
No,
that
I
you were perfectly
blame
fat and
liberal
happy
progressives.
about for 50 years.
Franklin, we have asked to have across state lines competition for years, and Democrats won't agree.
I was trying to make a point before we got into this. I'm going to try to finish it. With my deductible of $4,000, I had to have tests ran. And every time I went to get a test, I had to give them some money. Anyway, when I went through the surgery, I had to give them some money. Anyway, now I find out that because the pricing was coming in at the same time, it was changing their portion of the deductible. Now, somebody I paid a $1,500 deductible to's got to give $1,000 back to me. This is a nightmare.
That was happening before Obamacare.
This is a nightmare trying to keep up with the way this is being. And also,
I went through the same thing with some surgery about 4 years ago, where I had to pay all this money out.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, I get a big check back because of the deal they had with the insurance company. Well, that was way before Obamacare went into effect. This is nothing new. The problem I have is that you want to blame Obamacare for all these problems in the system when most of them were already there.
Franklin,
now, what I'm
you
trying
just
to
didn't
say,
know it.
and they will get progressively worse under government control.
Everything. They have a code for everything you can
They
think
already
of.
did that.
No, they didn't. No, they did not.
I tell you, I have to deal with this stuff all the time in my business. We have a book that has thousands of different codes
Did your book get bigger after Obamacare?
No.
Yes, it did too, Franklin.
No,
your
it
nose
really
is starting to
didn't.
get a little longer. That book got bigger.
No, they have a code for everything.
Franklin, nobody except a dyed-in-the-wool liberal progressive would think that a government running a huge system could make the system better.
All right, you know what? We've come to the end of our hour again. I want you to be thinking about the internet being controlled by the government, and also you can now think about someone managing your Facebook account after you die. See you next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry, and Franklin Chansey. Catch them again on Whoop FM at noon today and every Wednesday morning from 7:30 to 8:30. Now, back to more music on Whoop FM.